In the previous video, you heard me use the terms UX and UI design. You're probably wondering what these terms mean and how they're different from each other. According to usertesting.com, user experience design is the process of designing products that are useful, easy to use, and delightful to interact with. You can think of this as the umbrella term for what we're doing when we design interfaces. UX design includes things like user research, creating personas, doing usability testing, creating user stories, designing user flows, and designing the user interface. So user interface or UI design is purely focused on the visual design of the interface for an app or a website. It involves choosing colors, fonts, and styling interactive elements like icons and buttons. Now that you understand what it means when I refer to UI or UX design, I'm going to go through a few key design principles that you should keep in mind as we move through this course. The 5 foundational principles of UI design that I want to go through with you are clarity, flexibility, familiarity, efficiency, and consistency. I understand that these words might not mean much to you at the moment, but I'm going to take you through a few practical examples to show you how they apply to your designs. Clarity. So clarity means your designs should be simple and easy to understand. There's a common saying that a confused mind says no. And when someone is confused by your interface, they're very likely to stop using it. You want to avoid using elements that don't have a clear meaning in your interface. When you create an interface, the user should always know 3 basic things. Firstly, they should know where they are. Then they should know what they need to do. And finally, they should know what's going to happen next, like when they click on a button or drill down into something. They should know what to expect. And that is how you bring clarity into your user interface design. Now let's look at some examples. You'll see that the modal on the left has dozens of checkboxes that are aligned in all sorts of different ways. There's no clear hierarchy to indicate what the most important action is. There are 12 buttons in that one modal, and they all look equally important. This is definitely going to leave a user feeling confused about what to do and about what's going to happen next. Now compare that to the modal on the right. This is a good example of clarity in UI design. It comes from InVision, which is an interactive prototyping software platform that we use here at XMPRO. We use it to prototype products like our app designer and the data stream designer. You'll see that this modal has a very clear hierarchy in terms of text. You can tell by the heading that this modal is all about deleting your prototype. There's a warning that tells you if you do this, you can't undo it. It also shows you all the things that are going to happen once you click the button. And they make the default choice prominent, so you're clear which one is actually going to delete your prototype. Now let's look at flexibility. In the 1990s, the fathers of user experience design, Jacob Nielsen and Ralph Mullich, came up with something called heuristic evaluation, which is a way to do usability evaluations. They then turned those heuristics into 10 rules. Their rule around flexibility says that every system has 2 types of users. You have beginner users and power users, and your system should be created to empower both of those. One way that you can build flexibility into your interfaces is by adding shortcuts. While that's not necessarily directly applicable to the apps you'll create in the XMPRO app designer, it's useful to get you thinking about how you can cater for users with different skill levels. You could create an easily accessible icon that power users can click on to navigate directly or provide tooltips for beginners. These simple tweaks can go a long way to accommodating both types of users in your interface. The third principle we're going to look at is familiarity. I want to stress, you do not have to reinvent the wheel with your user interface design. Using familiarity means that you're going to use elements that users are used to seeing in interfaces. One example is using a house icon to show them how to get back to the home page. Using familiar elements in your interface is one way to reduce the learning curve for your app and also improve the speed at which people use it. One way to add familiarity is by using commonly accepted terms. Things like home, search, cart, delete, and cancel. Words like main, find, or remove have a similar meaning in the literal sense, but they're just not commonly used in interfaces, and those uncommon terms might add confusion to the user experience. Efficiency refers to how long it takes an expert user to complete a task in your app. You should always be asking yourself whether there's a more efficient way to do something in your app. But you have to also be careful to not reduce the steps so much that you start negatively impacting the user experience, especially for those beginner users that we talked about in the flexibility section. These efficiency examples are a bit small, but they do demonstrate what a big impact a small change can have. So on the left, you can customize your email preferences for an email newsletter by choosing whether you want to receive emails immediately, daily, or not at all. And when the user clicks on one of these radio buttons, they turn blue, but there's no save button. It turns out that the system automatically saves your choice, but there's no indication to the user that anything actually happened, and this might be confusing to them. So if you look at the example on the right, you'll notice a very subtle difference. There's a green tick icon with the word saved. By adding that simple element, you've given the user an indication that their action worked. The main thing to take away from this example is that the screen on the left tried to be too efficient and ended up negatively impacting the user experience. By adding a small indicator like that saved message on the right, the designer could create a much more pleasant experience that was still efficient for the user. The last principle we'll cover in this lesson is consistency. You want to create consistency in the look and feel of your app, but also in how the user interacts with it. Elements should mean the same thing every time the user sees them in your interface. It's important to keep in mind that different words, symbols, and even colors have meanings that people associate with them, and it's important to use them consistently across your interface. In the example on the left, you'll see that there's not a lot of consistency being used in this interface. The fonts, colors, and sizes are completely different. It's difficult to make sense of what's going on. Even the main menu is in the middle of the page. And on the right, we have a great example of consistency. This is Zapier.com's App Store. They've created a format that they use for each of the apps they have an integration for. You'll notice that each app follows the exact same pattern. It has an icon, a heading, and a description. In this example, the user will know exactly where they are, what's going to happen next, and what they're supposed to do. So let's recap the principles of UI design that you need to keep in mind as you create your app interfaces. Your designs should have clarity, and the user should always know where they are, what to do, and what to expect. You need to be flexible to allow power users and beginners to easily use your interface. Use elements that are familiar to your users to help speed up their learning curve and get their work done. Make your design efficient so that there are no unnecessary steps, but be careful of making it so efficient that you negatively impact the user experience. Use consistency in the look and feel and how your user interacts with the app. It's worth considering what meaning certain icons, words, and colors have before adding them to your interface. Join me in the next module to learn all about responsive design.